Throughout history, countless individuals have tried to pull off scams and deceive others for their personal gains. However, few have managed to be as successful and audacious as Gregor MacGregor, the Scottish king of con.
I'm a con man.
His scheme was so intricate and well thought out that it managed to deceive even the most skeptical and discerning minds. With a combination of charm and wit, MacGregor had even the most savvy investors and financial institutions wrapped up in his web of lies. This video is the untold truth of the man that was able to single-handedly pull off one of the biggest scams in history, and how to make millions with nothing but lies.
What do you want to know? Hello.
MacGregory was born in 1786 to the Scottish clan Gregory. He lived in a wealthy family with his father working as a captain in the East Indian Company. MacGregory was no stranger to a life of affluence and wealth. Growing up, he had the privilege of attending some of the best schools around. At 16 years of age, he enrolled in the British Army with the hopes of one day achieving great societal status. At first, things didn't go as planned. He was stationed at an outpost in Kent for a while, where he saw little to no action during the early periods of the Napoleon Wars. When the chance came for deployment, MacGregory seized it with both hands. Like the well-calculated man he was, he won the heart of a young woman, Maria Bowater, whose wealth he would later use to purchase the rank of a captain. Ordinarily, this rank would take years to achieve. Unfortunately for MacGregory, he couldn't purchase competence. As the captain of the 57th Foot, MacGregory could not prove his competence on the battlefield. He made several rash and unreasonable decisions that left his men captured or dead. There had been a story of MacGregor jumping out of his window into a river to escape a siege, while his men were left to fend for themselves. However, despite the military shortcomings of MacGregor, his men still flocked around him, willing to take his lead. This, of course, had much to do with MacGregory's charming and winning personality.
Yes to what?
Anything.
On his return to London, he falsely adopted the title Sir and claimed to be a Scottish royal.
He claims to be not human.
The Edinburgh elite could see behind this facade and weren't convinced by MacGregor.
I can see your soul in the edges of your eyes.
With the death of his wife, Maria, MacGregor found it more and more difficult to live up to his false image. He later opted to leave London for Latin America. He experienced tremendous success fighting under General Francisco de Miranda and Simon Bolivar. In a very short time, MacGregory rose to the rank of general in the army of Venezuela and New Granada, showing courage and leadership in the war for Venezuela's independence from Spain. After several military campaigns against the Spanish colonizer, MacGregory then set sail towards a region known as the Mosquito Coast. There, he met with a native Indian king who he somehow convinced to grant 8 million acres of territory along Central America's Mosquito Coast. This was 8 million acres of swampy, barren, pest-ridden, and largely uninhabitable lands. Nevertheless, this was all MacGregor needed to orchestrate his next set of plans.
I'm the devil. Hope you hold it against me.
When MacGregor returned to England, his social status and public perception had changed. By this time, he had earned enough credibility through his previous association with then-General Francisco de Miranda, who had now become a well-respected politician. Granted that his opinions now held more weight, MacGregor took to work selling his newly found city of Poitiers. He sold himself to members on the English aristocracy as the Caken Prince of Poitiers, and led them to believe that he had an express authority to sell land rights and govern the country of Poitiers. MacGregor produced several official-looking documents, including a land grant from the Mosquito King, maps, and a flag to support his story. Coincidentally, around this period, a manual titled Sketch of the Mosquito was reportedly published by one captain, Thomas Strangways, who was claimed to be a captain in the 1st Native Poitiers Regiment. This manual described Poitiers in more detail. It even went as far as including engravings and drawings depicting Poitiers as a paradise filled with virgin sand, mountains of gold and silver, and blessed with the beautiful terrain of full large rivers that run some 100 miles up into a fine, healthy, and fruitful country. It didn't take long for Britain to buy into this sham. MacGregor had struck a gold mine here. He quickly opened offices in London and Edinburgh, where he sold Poyer lands at 2 shillings per acre.
10 shillings, sir.
As the demand kept rising, the price of 1 acre increased from 2 shillings to 4 and then 6 shillings. MacGregor had the wealthy elite stumbling over themselves for some pieces of Poyer land. At the peak of MacGregor's scheme, he had Poyasian loan listed on the London Stock Exchange and had many British pockets filled with fake Poyasian currency. And just like that, the first set of Poyer citizens set sail on the Honduras packet to their newly assigned country. Upon getting to the shores of Poyer, the eagerly awaiting British were in for a rude awakening. The city they all thought to be somewhat out of a fantasy movie was nothing but a figment of a con man's imagination. Instead of a fertile and mineral-rich land, what lay before the victims of MacGregor's scam was an uninhabitable swampland. They found no towns, no resources, and no signs of civilization. The land was neither suitable for agriculture nor mining, and there was no opportunities for wealth or prosperity. In reality, they had all been scammed of fortunes and left stranded in a hostile and uninhabitable area with no means of returning home. MacGregor had misled them with false promises and stolen their money, leaving them to suffer the consequences of his trickery. For some of MacGregor's victims, this voyage to Poyer marked a tragic end to their life. Many of them were ill-prepared for harsh conditions of the Mosquito Coast and succumbed to various diseases such as yellow fever and malaria. The lack of adequate food and medical supplies also contributed to their suffering and death. Surviving victims of MacGregory's scam were fortunate enough to be saved by a passing British colony ship. Nonetheless, the harsh conditions and lack of resources had taken a heavy toll on their lives, with several victims never really recovering from the financial and physical devastation caused by his scam. After being exposed for his Poyer scam and escaping prosecution, one would have thought MacGregory would quickly turn a new leaf. But once a con man, always a con man. He fled Britain for France, where he continued to use false identities and titles to gain the trust of his victims. He even attempted to sell shares in another imaginary country called New Poyer.
Seriously.
However, his activities eventually caught up with him, and he was arrested and imprisoned in France. But MacGregory's time behind bars was short-lived. As soon as he was released, MacGregor fled to Venezuela, where he lived off the rest of his days.